Well, this is the second quarter of our Week 3 previews on the Irish NFL Show. Shout out to all of you joining us on YouTube live this Thursday. And a reminder again that our weekly previews are also available as 4 separate podcasts where we cover all of the different games, starting with the early Sunday window. And we have a very heavy AFC run of teams in the second half of that early Sunday window, led off by Texans at the Jags, Brian. Texans haven't looked too bad in the opening couple of weeks of the season. They got a very young roster, as we know. They still have a lot of rebuilding to do. They're trying to bet in CJ Stroud there. They've got some, pretty decent players on the other side of the ball, and they, albeit 0-2, and not a hopeless 0-2 to start the season. Jags, on the other hand, pretty much as we expected to start the season. Some explosive offense, but they also give up a lot of points. And if it's not happening for Trevor Lawrence and Christian Kirk, Calvin Ridley et al., it can get ugly quite quickly for them. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, we didn't really get into too much around CJ Stroud's performance last weekend because we were quite excited by what we saw of Richardson for the Colts. But he threw 2 touchdowns in his home opener. He had quite a decent game for a rookie. And these divisional games are strange, in particular the AFC South. We always talk about divisional games and how teams beat up on each other. Like the Texans went in there last year in week 5 and won 13-6. The reverse game was 31-3 to the Jags. That was week 18. Of course, the Jags were hitting form. They were going to the playoffs. We saw it again last week, the Jags. The friendlies on offense, there's times where they look so explosive. We saw it week 1 in Indianapolis. And then the following week, I'm not necessarily saying they lay an egg because the Chiefs' defense with Chris Jones back was there last week. Yeah, there was a big difference. I'm nervous about this one because the Jags really need to get this one. The Jags, we touched on the Bills beating up on bad teams. The Jags need to beat up on bad teams this year for too many years. Even it looked like they were progressing in the right direction. They always find ways to lose these games. And the Texans will look at this game going in. It's going to be a very hot day. There was something in the region of 90 people that were taken to the hospital at the Jags game last weekend because of the heat. It was 31 degrees Celsius. They're looking at a similar forecast Sunday. Doesn't necessarily mean the home team are always going to be the ones that can deal with the heat. I think the Jags will win, but I'm not comfortable about it. Genuinely, I think the Texans are trying for an upset. I think they played reasonably well in the opening 2 games. Haven't got on the right side of a victory. I think the Jags are sneaky, but I don't think it's going to be as straightforward as people may seem.
Colin, anyone who looked at the social media feed from last week's Texans-Colts games would have seen there was plenty of fight from the Texans off the field as well as on it. Do you think they can translate some of that to Jacksonville?
They can, and I label this one Kids in America because essentially this is the 2 young QBs. I think CJ Stroud has been really good. I think the fascinating thing has been that he hasn't been the issue, I feel, for the Texans. What you expected from him coming out of college, you have seen, and he's been able to deal with kind of the step up into the league. For the Jags, they've been really disappointing. And I talked on Tuesday's show about Chris Jones's win rate. 75% was just, that's terrifying. They have to sort that out. They're going up, though, against the Texans team who won't have that. And I know, Connor, you're a fan of the number 3 overall pick, and I think he's a very good player, but he is not Chris Jones, and Chris Jones with a point to prove. The Jags need to do better. They need to keep the ball moving, and they need to ensure that the trips to the red zone are more efficient. If the Jags were to lose this, I think at that point there will be real discussions around play calling and around Doug Peterson choosing to hand that off. But I think ultimately they have enough firepower to overcome a plucky Texans side.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. I think that the Texans have been a nice surprise. I think offensively they've clicked a lot better than perhaps we thought they would. I think Stroud, like both of you have been saying, I think has settled in pretty well. I don't think he's thrown a pick yet, has he? He's been really solid and probably operating at a higher level than a lot of people expected, given the spot that he found himself landing in. I think this is a game that the Jags just have to win. Like you're starting out the season dropping a game against a team that might end up with the number 1 or number 2 overall pick next year. It's much tougher assignments ahead. in some ways looks like a get-right game after the Chiefs last week. I don't think it's going to be easy for them. I think the weather conditions are definitely going to play a factor, Brian. And I don't think that necessarily favours the home team. It's not like the Texans aren't used to heat in Houston themselves either, to be fair. I think the Jags will have it. I don't think they're necessarily going to run away with it, though, because that's not how they've looked so far this season. This is the kind of game where you need to get something going, and you'd like to see them click in a way that we haven't so far. I'd be pretty downbeat on the rest of the season if it shapes up with a loss for them, but I think the Jags will have enough to get it done. Colts at the Ravens, Brian. Lamar Jackson certainly looked like his own self last week. Real breakout for him after a slightly lackluster first game out. Do we see that form continuing, do you think?
Yeah, I'd be more convinced on this one as opposed to the last one in terms of, we're talking about two AFC South teams going on the road. I think the Colts are in a difficult spot here. Richardson is unlikely to play at the time recording. It looks like Gardner Minshew was going to play. The Ravens, in fairness, have a lot of injury concerns. The offensive line was banged up last weekend. Odell Beckham's unlikely to play. The Ravens obviously to find ways of having injuries, no matter whether it's offensively, defensively, but they've enough about them this season for me. They've come into the season. We spoke about it in the lead up to the season when we were doing our AFC North preview. Whether there's no more excuses for this Ravens team because the last year and a half it's all about Lamar contracts, social media things going out. Is he getting on with the ownership? They all seem to be disgruntled around the contract. It's all gone away. They put Flowers in, like Zay Flowers, like Colin put him up for his rookie MVP. And right now, it's hard to argue with that. He's so explosive. It's a different dynamic to what they've had. We spoke on Tuesday about the precision of Lamar going down the middle of the field. It's back to what we saw a couple of years ago. The Ravens, for me, just look like I wouldn't say it's a juggernaut situation just yet, but I think this is a difficult one for the Colts going in. And can they stay with him? I don't see. I think this is a Ravens strong victory on Sunday.
Yeah, same as it ever was for the Ravens, Colin, as Brian has been saying. If they ever get healthy, watch out, but that just doesn't seem to be the way things work in Baltimore. But it's obviously that injury on the other side of the ball where the constant Gardner gets a chance to go against Baltimore. Can he lead this offense and get them going in some way, shape, or form, or is the loss of Richardson going to be too much for them to overcome, given how well he started the season for the Colts?
Beckham, Clowney, Hill, Humphrey, Linderbaum, Owe, Stanley, Williams. That is the Ravens injury report that was released 11 minutes ago. And do you know when you have that many players out, what do you need? You got to have faith. And that is what I believe the Ravens will have. I think the Colts need to have faith too. They are handling it right. They're not going to put Richardson back in, and they're going to run it with Minshew. I'm with Brian on this. I think the Ravens find a way. This offense has been great. Like talked about on Tuesday again. I suppose he's reduced the way to go from 2.9 to 2.6 in terms of release time. It sounds so minuscule, but that is phenomenal to move that. It tells you there has been a significant change in the philosophy there, and Lamar is carrying it out. And I just think that the Ravens, despite the injuries, are kind of riding the crest of a wave right now, and I have them continuing with that.
Yeah, I'm going to roll beside that. I think you both covered it very well there for all the reasons outlined. I'm going Ravens in that one. Next game, in many ways, is arguably the most interesting of the weekend. Chargers at Vikings, two teams at 0-2. Brian's face lights up. It's like one of the most beautiful things every Thursday is to see the first mention of the Chargers. And Brian just come to life. Let me at him like Scrappy Doo. Let me at him. He's just waiting to have another cut of Brandon Staley. One of these teams, excluding the possibility of a tie, I suppose, Colin, drops to 0-3. Question is, who needs it more? Are Chargers going to Charger or are the Vikings going to Vike?
Yeah, that's I put this one down as Mike and the Mechanics. Do you remember All I Need Is a Miracle? That is this game. I think that there's so much pressure on the Chargers, and we don't know if Brandon Staley has lost the dressing room, but it's like when you see a head coach go to the podium and react in that way, and you see the way they have gone about things, it's difficult. There's a lot of like, we talk about the talent there, but like, did they really scare you? And their number one pick in the draft, we haven't really seen. I still thought they needed a speedster. Eckler is a very good player when he's on the field, but he's had injury issues. I really like the offense, right? And you look at what they're doing, but defensively, they've tried to fix and they've been better against the run, but that has just opened up holes in the secondary. I don't think things are going to work under Brandon Staley. I don't think it's the analytics piece. I think the job is just too big for him. There are very good coaches who use analytics and who are willing to take risks, but he wilted. And Arthur Smith, whether you like him or you don't, has the courage of his convictions, and he is going to stick to his guns. Brandon Staley, as soon as the criticism came, as soon as there were a couple of decisions that people really began to question, he wilted. And you don't know, is he going to go for it on fourth down? Is he not? His team don't know. They're in no man's land. I have the Vikings getting the win on this, even though you would say the Chargers have the better roster.
Yeah, I have to say I agree with that. Before we bring you in, Brian, I think one of the things that really disappointed in the Jacksonville game, and you can see how it gets to Staley when it's brought up. It was an easy one to kick to touch and just move on, but it really gets to him. Like, they just don't show up in the clutch. They did it again last week. They had a chance to win the game, ended up getting backed up and having to kick a field goal to tie it. They win the toss in overtime. 3 straight incompletions, a 3 and out. They punt the ball back and they end up losing that game, a game they should have won. Again, it keeps coming back at Staley. All this talent you've got, and they brought in Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator. You take a cold, hard look at the offense and take a look at the numbers. They're top 5 in a lot of statistical categories. They move the ball as well as any offense in the league. They're top 5 in yards per passing attempt. They're top 5 in yards per play. They're having no problem getting up and down the field, but they're not getting enough stops on defense. They're coming up short in those key moments. Against that, I saw a lot of stuff that I liked from the Vikings last week. I thought they were very sloppy. Fumbles in particular, ball security was a big issue. You would hope that doesn't carry over from week to week, because they really coughed that one up. I thought they could have had that game against the Eagles, and we had a back and forth on WhatsApp about that. What I think is one of the stupidest rules in the NFL, where you fumble the ball and it goes out of the end zone and it's a touchback. I think it's just unnecessarily punitive. Cost Justin Jefferson as he was stretching for a touchdown, and that got the Eagles out of jail for my money. I think the Vikings take care of this one and drop the charges to 0-3.
I'm Phil Belichick. I am throwing the challenge flag on that. The offense has almost every advantage going. The touchback is one of the few things defenses have. If it's not there, well, we may as well just turn football into bowling. Have lads kind of throw it towards the end zone. Basically, bring in your throwing version of Johnny Sexton kicking for the end line. Cross Johnny Sexton with Rory Delap is essentially what we're going to look at. No, it's there. The offense needs to take care of the ball. It's the one area where they need to do it. Stick with the rule.
Agree to disagree. Brian won't agree to disagree on Brandon Staley. The book very much out on Staley for Brian. I can only guess which way you're going, Brian, but tell us, what's your pick for Chargers Vikings?
You've bowled me over here, Colin, with this. I'm going to go with the Vikings to win this game, because I would agree with you, Colin, from what we've seen in both teams so far. The Vikings were very lackluster in the fourth game against the Bucs, in particular Kirk Cousins. He fumbled the ball a number of times. He was careless in terms of giving picks away. And last week, again, I agree with you. I think both games the Eagles played. I know we're going to get the Eagles there. I think both games in which they played, they've been there and could have been had. The Patriots could have had them, and the Vikings certainly should have had them last week. It wasn't for some careless play. If they get that right on Sunday and they secure the ball, I think they find a way to win this game. And I think I was more impressed with the Vikings despite the loss last week than I've been with the Chargers in those 2 games. So for me, the Vikings get the win in Brandon Staley. Just pressure just intensifies.
Brian, we go straight back to you for Patriots Jets, and this is one for all the mascots. Everybody wants to see Bill Belichick put Zach Wilson's head in a spin. Every non-Jets fan, I should clarify, wants to see him put Zach Wilson's head in a spin and have him seeing ghosts out there. Is there any way that the Jets can avoid that happening?
Yes, I think there is, and I think it will be on Sunday. Patriots are going for 15 in a row, but we didn't see a true reflection of the Jets' defense last weekend. I thought they were from what we saw in week 1. And we've discussed how going into the season we thought it was Aaron Rodgers. This Jets defense can play with most teams. And I think they would have ghosts in Mac Jones' head. I haven't been convinced by Mac Jones in 2 games. Zach Wilson just needs to play a measured game for me in this one, and the Jets will find a way to win. Now, that is a very difficult task. I get it. And then the Patriots have had their number. As I said, they're going for 50 in a row. The slide has to break at some stage. And I think it will be Sunday because the Patriots, they'd reasonably well. They haven't shown anything for me that really puts them in this position to go out and go, oh my God, this is a clear-cut Patriots victory. I think the Jets navigate a victory. It won't be pretty. It'll be a very low-scoring game. It could be like a 4 or 5 field goal type of game. The Jets somehow sneak a victory, but nothing convincing. I'll be more so down to the defense withholding any pressure from the Patriots offense over the course of 4 quarters than Zach being the killer, Wilson.
Colin, the Jets can break the streak if Zach Wilson plays a measured game. Is that too much to ask for?
Yes, it is. He's terrible. The most difficult thing for me about this game was choosing which 80s song I felt was most applicable. Was it Michael Bolton's How Am I Supposed to Live Without You? Because that's the Patriots and life after Tom Brady, but also for the Jets, obviously, in life after Aaron Rodgers. Or was it I Just Died in Your Arms Tonight? Because that is the Jets when the ball is in Zach Wilson's arms. He can't play. He is not a dink and dunk QB. He should be, and Brian is right. If he was, that would be fine, but he can't do it. He's actually he is much better in structure, but in his head, he thinks he's better out of structure, and it's like that. He rose to the number 2 overall pick partly off his pro day, and he had that crazy kind of pass on the run, except he wasn't under any pressure whatsoever. And it's like he can't. Another way we were talking about Russell Wilson gets addicted to certain things. It's like Zach Wilson has never got beyond that pass, and he keeps looking for it. And that is exactly what Bill Belichick wants. Watch what they do. They'll push all the guys into the front. They'll force Wilson out of the pocket, and they'll know that he is going to make a mistake. I think this Patriots defense is for real. I think their offense is meh, but that's still better than it was last year. And I just don't trust the Jets offense to get it done, which is a real shame because there's lots of talent. But again, we talked about it Tuesday. You've got guys making comments on social media, deleting social media. If it hadn't been for Garrett Wilson making insane catches and insane plays over the past couple of weeks, it would have been flatline. The Jets' offense wouldn't have existed.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about these games being difficult, even with Aaron Rodgers in harness for the Jets. This was always going to be a tricky start to the season. They're up in the first 3 weeks against 3 of the best defenses in the NFL. Not, of course, counting their own very well stocked unit. I think that Jets defense, to your point, Brian, is going to be licking its own chops. I think the Patriots offense looks better in pretty much every way, except in the most important way, which is that Mac Jones really doesn't look that great. We always knew the ceiling was relatively low there, but in year 1, the floor was perhaps a lot higher than we would have expected for a rookie quarterback, which gave people what I think now has turned out as we enter year 3 to have been a little bit of false hope. I think the Jets will be really looking to get after them. I think they'll make it messy. I still think the Patriots have just enough on both sides of the ball to get over the line, though, because Wilson is just so poor. That Wilson-to-Wilson connection where he got that one throw through the tight window makes you think, maybe if you can just stay clean, to your point, maybe if you get a measured game from him. I just don't think it's in him, and I certainly don't think the Patriots are going to let him have that in this particular game. I think the streak stays alive.